Welcome, Nick. All right, you guys, so welcome to San Diego Athletics. Welcome to the Gaining the Mental Edge presentation. We're going to teach you guys a mindfulness-based meditation practice. And I'm actually not going to do that. My colleague, Jim Cahill, is. He is a board-certified biofeedback therapist, and he started the mindfulness-based biofeedback therapy training, which is something that I do. Yeah, it's a big mouthful, and we'll probably be saying that a lot throughout the presentation, but it's a pretty special skill. You guys have probably all heard of meditation before. Yes. So anyway, I want to say thank you to San Diego Athletics, first of all, for letting us host this. Anders, right? He's awesome. So yes, this is Jim Cahill. He is a guru and in the practice of mindfulness-based meditation. I'm really blessed to have him here presenting because, well, I think I can do it some justice. You have a guru right here. And this is my lovely husband, Per Larson. So if you guys he's also a big supporter, and his life has been affected by this practice for me because you're going to listen and hear my story. It's very much been a blessing for me. So, all right, so let's get started. Jim, is there anything you'd like to add? Okay. All right, so the goals of this presentation for you guys is to think about, I know a lot of you are competitive athletes, and some of you are just here to learn how to be calm, and some of you, all of you have different goals of being here. And all of us probably have some kind of stress in our lives now, right? Whether you're training, whether it's something to do with family, whether it's something to do with, home life. Come on in, you guys. You guys can come on down to this end. Welcome. Howdy. So I don't think did I introduce my name, Dr. Teresa Larson, Seven Movement RX PT. That's something that I think I probably should put out there. Like, I do physical therapy by trade, but the art of mindfulness-based physical therapy is now kind of in the cards. So anybody that works with me is going to get a handful of this. But yeah, so I'm a physical therapist by trade. I love working with the body, but I realized that I cannot help people effectively unless I help them manage daily life, how they downregulate and upregulate their nervous system. So with that being said, this is my information, so Movement RX. You can find me at San Diego Athletics. This is my email, this is Jim's email and information as well. So at the end, you guys have questions. You guys have more questions, please email us. Okay, so with that being said, going back to goals, a lot of you are athletes, but you've got some stress of training, maybe stress of home life, family, whatever's going on. Some of you are still in the military, some of you are not. Some of you are getting out, transitioning, that's a lot of stress. But there are good stresses and bad stresses. But the goals for you guys today are to understand that this practice, this type of calming the mind and centering yourself is actually going to be very beneficial for your sport. It'll help you perform better. So if your thing is you need to focus, and you need to zone out the people that are yelling at you, or you need to zone out how much weight is on the bar, you need to focus in, this practice will help you with that. It'll help you in your sport, whether you're a triathlete, basketball player, volleyball player, and you need to be in the precious present of the game, this practice will help you with that. But more importantly, this practice will help you in your life. It's going to help you regulate your mood. It's going to help you recover faster, because one, it incorporates the act of actually sleeping. Like, to be a good mindfully based meditation person, you have to be able to sleep well too. So you'll recover faster, your mood will improve, you will decrease stress in your life, so the bad kind of stress, the distress. You'll gain balance. I don't think anyone ever really gets into complete balance in their life, but you'll at least be able to attain more balance and feel like you have a more element of control over decisions and what's on your mind, right? Because sometimes the thoughts in our mind they create distress and they can create disease. And then big word, introspection. This practice will give you an insight into your own self. So if you've never actually looked inside who you are, looked into your soul, got to know you, this is a great way to do that without a lot of extra shit going on, like a lot of extra chatter. I do drop swear words.
You're cool.
So, just like when I teach for Mobility WOD, and I talk about the spine, and I talk about torque, and I talk about core to extremity movement, I talk about torque as kind of a secret weapon. If you want to get stronger, apply torque to your body. If you want to get more introspection and more calm and better mood, mindfulness-based meditation. This is your secret weapon. So you guys, it's secret, but I want you to share it. I want you to share it with your family, your friends, after tonight. Any questions about goals? Okay. So, schedule of the evening. So, we're going to talk about stress. So, the good stress versus the bad stress. So, good stress is like eustress, okay? Good stress, and then distress is bad stress. I'm going to tell you my personal story, which I've done a few times, that actually is being put into a memoir this year. I have a publisher, HarperCollins, actually wants to work with me and wants my memoir out there. So I will share a little bit of that story with you tonight, which I think is powerful, but powerful in a way that people can relate to and help people in their life. Jim is going to talk about our response to stress, like what our mind does, and the mindfulness piece to the practice. And then we're actually going to meditate at the end. So that's what the yoga mats are for. You guys are going to get into either a sitting pose or a shavasana pose and go through a practice. So, with that being said, I'm going to first talk about stress. And the way I like to first talk about it is present the good drugs. So, of all of the research, both personal and professional, I've done on the body and mind, and what's good for the body, and people asking me after seminar, what's the best supplements to take? How can I get bigger? How can I get stronger? How can I get, how can I have a good attitude like you? Well, here are the drugs I take. I sleep, right? I strive to sleep 8 hours a night, okay? And Jim can probably give you more of the research behind that. So Barbell Shrug just did a podcast on sleep. I think it was like Dr. Parsley, right?
Yeah, he's really smart.
Yes. Really smart doctor. Is talking about sleep studies. So 8 hours a night, that's the goal. Diet. So you guys have an awesome nutritionist here, Margot. A good balanced, I'm not a nutritionist, but a good balanced, nutrient-dense diet is very important. Then you got exercise. So consistent exercise, and a lot of you here, I know you through the gym, so I know you're all pretty consistent in your exercise. But there obviously is a way to overdo exercise, which I'll talk about in a bit. And then the last one is state of mind, which is kind of the one that's sometimes hard to fathom. Is that state of mind it can be a very, very awesome drug. Because no matter what goes on in your day, the phone call, the email, the crappy lift at the gym, or the crappy hour practicing out of a good hour, like whatever happens, the ability to regulate what's on your mind and kind of control what's on your mind can be very, very effective, very healthy. So we call that, so this whole state, if you are doing these things, you kind of put yourself in this homeostatic state, so state of balance. And that's both physiologically, right? That's physiologically, your tissues are in more balance. Therefore, your mind can also be in more balance. So we call that eustress. So eustress similar to homeostasis, okay? Body balance. Now, this is when the good drugs, so the good drugs of sleep, diet, exercise, state of mind, are under or overused. That's when we have problems. And unfortunately, in our society, there's a lot of that, right? A lot of people don't sleep enough. They think that's okay. They work a lot, overtrain. It's constant. So a lot of athletes I work with, I ask, when was your last rest week? And there's just a question mark. So overtraining is a big one. Not getting natural light. You know, who goes to work in the morning and you never see the actual sunlight unfiltered without sunglasses on? You know, without a window in front of your face. If you go to the bodybuilding class here at 6:30 a.m., you get a lot of natural sunlight in the morning. And then injury, of course, causes distress. So we could probably make a very long list of things that cause distress in our life. But here's how the brain works, and this is very simple. So when you wake up in the morning, okay, your brain wakes up and signals the pituitary to release. There's two kinds of hormones. So it's ACTH is the hormone that's released from the pituitary, and it kind of signals the adrenals, which are attached to the kidneys. So the kidneys, on top of the kidneys are the adrenals, and they release the hormone adrenaline, which is what you get when you train, right? So that adrenaline rush. It also releases cortisol and DHEA. Okay, but I think the important one for you guys to know is this. So if, let's say, you're in a chronic state of overtraining, you haven't had a rest week, 3 to 4 months, no rest, or you're constantly fatigued, but you keep pushing it because you got to make it to the open, right? That can create a problem with the adrenaline. You're constantly getting a rush of adrenaline, and especially when you don't need it. So if you're in a chronic state of stress, the adrenaline doesn't know how to regulate itself. So you're constantly in this upregulated state. So that's when you get adrenal fatigue. You get demotivated. Your numbers start to go down, right? And then your mood as well. So anyway, cortisol, DHEA, adrenaline have a very, very strong response on tissue. So if you have elevated cortisol levels, okay, over time, you know, chronic doesn't mean like years and years, 3 to 4 months. Okay, that's kind of signifies chronic. So if you have elevated cortisol levels over time, you can decrease. So it can signify blood glucose levels increasing. So when you wake up in the morning, blood glucose levels, if they're greater than 100 milligrams per deciliter, that means you're in a state of chronic stress. And we call that kind of a pre-diabetic state. So if you guys are nurses here, might be more familiar with that. There's more involved in just the blood glucose, of course, but we call this, if you have this number in the morning, blood glucose pre-diabetic. There's also the blood-brain barrier, which is a lipid layer in the brain, protects the brain. That starts to break down with chronic stress after 3 to 4 months. Okay, sleep. So sleep, the way we can tell, like physiologically, if you are in a chronic stress state, is at midnight, if you take your cortisol levels and they're more elevated, that's also a way to signify chronic stress state. And then, of course, the growth hormone. So growth hormone decreases, which for you guys that means recovery time decreases, which isn't good, especially if you're competitive. But also that's going to affect everything, every recovery, right? So if you're someone who suffers from chronic fatigue, that's a problem, right? Growth hormone decreases recovery, and recovery of tissues too. So let's say you have an illness. So if you're in a chronic stress state, the ability to recover from that illness isn't going to be as effective. So, and of course, the fatigue, the aging acceleration, those are all things that are common too with chronic stress states. So I kind of like to say, in our society, so we are human beings, right? That's what we call ourselves. We're human beings, Homo sapiens, but not human doings. But in our society, we are doing. Do more, do more, do more. So I like to say, do less and do it well. So do something you love and do it really well. Anything you want to add to that, Jim? With the stress cycle?
I don't think so. The blood-brain barrier, just the significance of that,
Yeah.
and what that does for us in terms of why it's there and why it's so protected.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
just that it's like a filter, that our brain is such a precious stone that not everything is allowed in there. Not everything that gets into your blood through your intestines or otherwise is allowed to the brain. The brain is called the privileged area, and so that's why there's these barriers. And a lot of things that stress does, and why it feels so bad, is because it actually lets stuff in that's not supposed to be there, like right in headquarters. And that's what that whole blood-brain barrier thing's about. Yeah.
Okay, so it kind of makes sense that stress, right? Stress doesn't just have to be I'm depressed. It means it can be I'm overtraining, right? I'm fatigued. Maybe you are depressed, right? But it can be you're not eating well either. Right? You're not getting consistent exercise. Maybe you're someone who worries a lot. Or maybe you're someone who likes to gossip, right? Gossip, bad attitude, things like that can create a stress response too. So, welcome. All right, so I'm going to give you guys, tell you my story a little bit, and I'm going to squat, so a little more comfortable in squat. Standing, I feel like I'm like talking down to you guys. Like I said, I'm putting out a memoir this year, and there's a couple themes in the book that I'm talking about. But one of which is kind of that search for self-regulation, that search for wellness. I was a professional athlete after college, after I got out of the Marine Corps, actually. I was a Marine Corps officer, engineer for 3.5 years, and very performance-driven. I find myself growing up by how well I performed, how well I looked. I also did fitness modeling, fitness competitions, and so everything was very much like, wow, I gotta win that game. Like, if I win that game, people are gonna like me. If I win that show, or I look good in that photo shoot, people are really gonna like me. And I started to build my self-esteem that way. And so that, kind of created this a negative self-image. So I went in the Marine Corps at the age of 22, so there's a lot of veterans here, I know, and levels of stress, so that's why I kind of talked about the stress in the beginning, because my levels of stress going from college to professional sports to the Marine Corps just kept elevating. And I really didn't know how to regulate it, because everything was defined by external. I needed reinforcement from others. I needed to win the game. I needed people to tell me I was good enough. I ran fast enough. I needed that external reinforcement. So in the Marine Corps, I was still doing some fitness modeling, but working a lot. As you guys know in the service, it's a lot of time spent with the troops. So not a lot of self-time. And I found myself not being able to handle the stress that I was putting myself under. Like, I wanted to be the best female Marine out there. I wanted to set an example. I wanted to get the 300 PFT, the 20 pull-ups, dead hang. I wanted to run the 3 miles in less than 18 minutes. I wouldn't feel like I was good enough unless I did that. And I did do that. But it still wasn't good enough. So what happened, I ended up developing an eating disorder. So when I was in the Marine Corps, I was in an engineer unit. I was one of 2 women, in this unit, and developed an eating disorder. So either sometimes I wouldn't eat, sometimes I would eat a lot, and then I would throw it up. And that became a very consistent thing. Over time, I sometimes would throw up 8 times a day. Sometimes I would throw up twice a day. It really just depended on what kind of stress I was under each day. But food became my drug, so I ended up overusing it. But, as you guys in the military know, I did ask for help, but I asked it kind of in secret, because I didn't want to get in trouble. And I was told to not really say anything, to kind of suck it up, work through it on my own. Because what's an eating disorder? Like, you have a hard time going out to eat, like, what's the problem? So, let me drink some water. It's getting nice and dry in here. So, I was told to suck it up, which I did, and I worked through it. And I was like, yeah, what is an eating disorder? Like, I have a hard time with food. I'm going to deploy to Iraq, and I'm going to deploy with my Marines, and I'm not going to let anything get in the way of that, because I had to be that strong female Marine presence. I wasn't going to not deploy. So I was able to kind of manage the symptoms, but I didn't really think it was a huge deal. Right? I knew I didn't have a problem with eating, but like that would go away as soon as I got into the war zone, right? No, not at all. So I got into the war zone. I had 54 Marines in my unit, and I was a female escort. So female escort, meaning I would, let me define this, okay? So being the tallest, probably more intimidating female Marine on the base in Fallujah, I would escort female insurgents that were caught by the Delta Force. So the regimental commander would sign me up, had me come with him in the middle of the night, pick up these female insurgents, because the Iraqis did not want men touching these women. Women were very much kind of products, I guess, property, I should say, in Iraq, in my province I was in. So I did that duty, and as well as running convoys during the day with my Marines. So it was pretty intense time, but my eating disorder became very much a monster during that time. So I didn't know how to handle my thoughts. I had no self-love time. Like, I didn't even know how to handle myself. So I trained a lot. Anytime I had off, I wouldn't sleep. I would go to the gym, and I would work out for 3 or 4 hours a day. Then I would go work. Then I might get up in the middle of the night and do a mission. But I was like, sleep, if I sleep, I couldn't sleep. My mind wouldn't stop. So I got sicker and sicker as I was out there, and it was in the elections of 2005, I was on convoy. I was malnourished, really couldn't focus. I was handling 3 different radios. Very, very intense and very important time in our history, actually, with Iraq. But I found myself in the middle of this convoy thinking, I need to throw up. And that was pretty effed up, right? I'm in the middle of a convoy and I have to think about my eating disorder. Got back, immediately went in to see my captain and was like, I can't, this is not healthy. If I stay here, the Marines aren't going to be safe. I'm not safe. But more importantly, someone else's lives could be affected by the fact that I can't concentrate. So I ended up turning myself in. The whole process was very, very challenging coming home, but I was medevaced with an eating disorder from Iraq. And it was very hard because here I am in front of all of these people with physical wounds, and here I am suffering from something that's very mental. And I really did make myself sick with something very mental. And sometimes it's still very hard to explain to people that, but so I saw a lot of psychologists, went through a lot of outpatient therapy, but I did not get much from that process. A lot of talk and a lot more agitation. I ended up stopping my symptoms, but I still had the agitation of the mind. The mind still didn't stop. I still had those thoughts of you're not good enough, just thoughts that were old tapes of belittling myself. Why can't you run fast? Why can't you run that fast anymore? Why can't you do this? Why can't you do that? So that's when I found the mindfulness practice. And it's been one of the most life-giving, soul-giving things I've done. I mean, I love to train. Thankfully I've gotten back into loving to train. I eat well, I sleep well. But now the secret weapon is I can handle what's on my mind. If something happens, I had a very intense situation happen recently. I don't have to blame myself for that intense situation. It's not, I know sometimes it's not about me. I'm able to distance myself from these thoughts that can affect my day, affect my week, affect my family, affect my relationship with my husband. And so that's where this practice goes for me. So that's a little bit of my story, but the whole come to wellness, you guys, this is a daily battle for me. Every day, getting that sleep, getting that good nutrition, and centering myself has been amazing. But if I don't do it, I can feel the effects. So with that, I would like my colleague Jim to expand upon the mindfulness piece.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Can I erase some of that stuff?
Sure. Yeah. Sure.
You guys, cards there, so I'm going to erase all this as contact information. And do you want to take a photo of this or anything before I do that? Okay. So I'm a biofeedback therapist and a mindfulness teacher. My biofeedback training has been around about 50 years in medicine. It's psychophysiology, it's mind-body medicine, it's a part of the integrative medicine. And I worked at Scripps Center for Integrative Medicine, which is kind of our flagship, actually in the nation, centers for bringing together stuff that traditionally isn't taught in med school. It was considered too hippy-dippy. Literally, when I proposed that we study this stuff in my brain lab at Scripps, my lab director said, "Jim, I used to be a hippie too." And he literally said that. He goes, we're not studying that. You got to study epilepsy. And I said, no. Which I almost lost my job the first time. And this was just in like the late 80s. And now that same guy is one of the people you go to if you want to get the largest list of studies on meditation. Same guy. That's how much stuff has changed. National Institutes of Health now spend over $100 million a year to study the so-called hippy-dippy thing. The problem we had with it was it was too complex to study with our tools of medicine early on because it requires subtlety. To study the effects of the mind, we have to make the mind an instrument. And that really wasn't the strength of Western science. Western science, from its outset, the natural philosophers, as they used to call themselves before they had the word scientist, they studied outside stuff. Because if you studied inside stuff, the church would knock on your door. And literally they'll put you on a timeout for the rest of your life. And you're lucky. The Holy Roman Empire at the time. And this was the time of the Inquisition. This was a really rough time to be curious without being a member of the right church. Galileo was literally put on timeout for the rest of his life. So what happened? Western science grew up as something that stayed really far away from anything that looked like it was psychological or subjective, internal, or invisible. Because the flag would go up, devil, or witch, right? And we had about 400 years of basically clinical insanity in Europe. And so it was a really no-go zone. And so the fact that all of these institutions, from Harvard and Princeton and Yale and the National Institutes of Health, are falling all over themselves to study this thing that used to be completely, like even in my own lifetime, 1989, was really a huge change. And the curve, we're studying mindfulness, yoga, or meditation. And this is about 1980. 1984, Herbert Benson at Harvard did one of the first studies on it, and it just kind of petered along. In 1989, I asked for permission and was told no, right? And now here we are. The data goes out to about 2014 right now, and the curve literally looks like this. It's the most amazing thing, yoga, meditation, and mindfulness. So it's really gathering legitimate, serious scientific interest all over. And you'll hear it on Oprah, and you'll hear it on TV, and you'll hear it from pretty much, you almost can't get away from it. And I'm calling it Nick mindfulness now because what's happening is it's being commodified and it's being, you know, really shrunk down to even like 3-second mindfulness. I think I heard 1-second mindfulness last year, right? And it's almost like another miss. It's almost like another miss. Like we missed it back in Galileo's time because it was a no-go zone. Now we're missing it in our time because we're so sped up. We want it in a second. It never happens within a second. Mindfulness is the process. And I love shortcuts. If I could make, I tell all of my patients, all my clients, I love shortcuts, but guess what? This is the shortcut. Twice a day. 10, 20 minutes. Start small, but build up. There's really no shortcut to dwelling in this quiet, deep place that's below our busy mind. There's no shortcut. Once you get there, it's dose dependent. The longer you stay there, the more transformative the effects. And some of these effects are really radical. The recent study that we did with the Dalai Lama's translator, who's my core teacher, is called the Shamantic Project, and it was designed by Nobel Prize-winning scientists, so you can see how far it's come. And they found that actually the DNA changed. Actually, it was my DNA in the study, and not very other people. And there's a little cap on the end of the DNA. It's like a protective cap. It's called a telomere. And there's an enzyme called telomerase. Okay, all that is a little maintenance enzyme. And they found that our telomerase, when
went significantly higher, which means we actually aged more slowly during the study time from meditation. So this is the effect of meditation, going not just into your bones and into your muscle, but into the cell and even deeper into the nucleus in the cell and into the DNA. So we see it at that level, at the microscopic level, and then we see it at the macroscopic level. When we take lumps and we put them in what's called an fMRI, it's a $20 million X-ray. We would have gone crazy if we had this in our brain lab back in the 90s. It was just amazing. It takes moving pictures of the brain, so you can see it actually lighting up like a live movie. You can have people do things, and you can see what part of the brain is kick in and make that thing happen. And when we put the first monk in there, here's how we draw brains. We saw this pattern of a ratio between this side of the brain and this side of the brain. So the brain always has two parts. So think of two of these side by side. If you look at the top, it would look like this. There's a ratio in the front of how active the right versus the left. And if you're a happy person, you tend to have more left and less right. Most people are pretty well in the middle. And the very first monk we put in this machine, we had to do a couple of meditations. He showed this pattern. It was like this. And when people have that pattern, even if they're just a little bit here, they tend to be much happier people. We didn't know what to do with this guy. He was literally off the scale. This was the first one. And so we've now been recruiting these guys from India and Tibet and elsewhere, and we're looking at what is it they've done. Now we know that it's real, we want to know how to do it. And so we've been busily, like good Western scientists, trying to distill down just what's the essence. Get rid of the robes, I don't have to shave my head, and cross legs maybe, but what's just the core thing I need to do to get some of these benefits, because they're clearly very, very real. And what we discovered is first and foremost, is they're training this one part of themselves, which is the attention. That in the East, for literally thousands of years, it sounds like very verbally, but literally for thousands of years, 3,500 years. We think from stone carvings, it's 5,000 years. We only came out of the jungle about 5,000 to 10,000 years ago. Right? So this is one of the first things we learned as Homo sapiens. They've been training the attention. And the way they do it is by realizing that what gets into the brain has to go through this funnel. And we'll call that the attention. And the attention is super limited, okay? You can only hold in that little funnel. It's like RAM on a computer. It's very precious and very limited. It's very unstable. You can only hold in there like 7 plus or minus 2 little facts. So the entire coolness of the universe, the coolest person you've ever met, the most amazing music, the most amazing idea you've ever had, the worst thing and the best thing in the entire universe, we can only consume that in these little tiny bites. Of course, you can swap one piece out and one piece in, but that's what makes up any moment in our life. And whatever fills this funnel, as far as you know, because there's no more knowing left when this is filled up, what's in there becomes what the universe is as far as you know in the moment. And we all know this. If you're caught up in, this morning I was surfing up in Katy, and this guy cut me off 2 times in a row. And I kind of lost it, especially for a meditation teacher. I think I actually invited him on the beach to talk more. And one of my students was surfing with me, and he's like, really? I said, yeah, I'm still doing my work. And there's this thing called the refractory period. And when you are in the grip of an emotion, you're done. When you're in the grip of an emotion, it can completely fill this funnel. And that is your reality, as far as you know, until you knock one of those pieces out and save a little bandwidth for something else in there. So our attention determines not just our moment, but the last hour, the day, and all that is adds up to be your life. It's just a series of these moments. And yet we give away our attention as if it was free. And it's the fundamental determinant of our experience of our life. It determines what we can see, it determines how we react to things, and it determines what we're going to do tomorrow. Whether we know it or not, every time we fill up our attention with this rather than that, we've trained towards this. So habitual anger, Your brain doesn't say, is this good for me or bad for me? It doesn't ask that question. All the brain asks is, are you going to do this again tomorrow? Okay, I'll make it easier. And it'll literally rewire to create a little circuit for anger. Not a real anger picture, right? Imagine a skill in which you paid attention to where your attention was. So you have to save one of these little bits. 7 plus or minus 2. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Let's say up to 9. By the way, that's why phone numbers are often 7 digits. They're easier to remember. If you save just 1 or 2 of these to watch the others, am I getting lost here? Have I filled it up with anger? Have I filled it up with stress? Have I filled it up with my next to-do thing? Do I think I'm really doing well to the extent I always have a list? I'm always judging myself about that list, and I'm a little bit stressed about that. If you just save a couple little things here, you've achieved something that I raised called introspection. Intro.